Hello everyone and welcome. Now, this is the part 2 of LGBT plus and school with Conspiracy Catz. How are you tonight?
Yeah, very good. How are you doing?
Doing good. So there might be people watching both live as well as replay who have no idea who you are. Unfortunately, everyone should know who you are, but go ahead and give a little introduction.
Well, I'm someone who's been a teacher for 20 years now, teaching science and maths in school. I also have a YouTube channel that kind of pokes fun at and debunks bad science, like, flat Earth or antivirus videos and stuff like that. But I suppose more relevant to this stream is the fact that I'm just a teacher and I've been for a long time, so I think that's probably the most important thing for this.
Yes, indeed. And the links to both Baltic Catz and Conspiracy Catz channels, as well as Catz's Twitter, are linked in the description box down below. So don't go now, listen to us first, and then go afterwards. Now, last time, it was two weeks or so ago when we had our first chat, we concentrated mainly on the aspect of students being LGBT plus. So I pulled up the figures from the your national statistics office, and the percentage of the total population in the UK for LGBT was somewhere around 3 point something percent, and that did not include intersex, non-binary people, etc. And who knows how much there are of these groups of people in the general populace. And we kind of went on the rail of how it shows in the student populace nowadays. How do you figure, in your experience nowadays, how visible is this percentage in the school staff, whether it be teaching staff or or the school staff in general?
I've worked with quite a lot of just openly gay teachers, and the kids, I think, all are aware of which teachers are lesbian or gay or whatever. I think that's fairly open, and that has been really since I started teaching about 20 years ago. So I don't know what it used to be like before then, but it's been very, very common that any school I've worked at has, pretty well-known staff who are either in relationships with, same-sex relationships or have been. In terms of trans staff, I've never, ever come across a single one or heard of a school that's got. Now, I'm sure there must be out there, but I've never come across one ever.
Right. You've been a teacher, as you said, 20 or so years. Um, have you seen a change in the openness in the working environment in schools in, say, well, England to begin to start with?
With the working environment, what to accommodate LGBT. Like I say, I think for me, when I maybe it was just the school that I started off in, but in the school I started off in, we did have, I think, two or three teachers, and they were all women who were all openly lesbian, and it was just a part of the staff room culture. Everybody knew, wasn't it? It wasn't gossip under the table, you know what I mean? Where you might go to some places and people will gossip and say, "Oh, I think he's gay," or "I think she's lesbian," or what. It wasn't like that at all. There was nothing under the table about it. It was just all very open from the very first school I went to. And I stayed there for about 12 years. And then when I moved on and bounced around a few others, it was the same thing. So in terms of a change, I think like I said, when I started, it was already fairly pretty open. But what I've never, like I said, what I've never seen is anyone who's sort of trans. And I think I don't know how that would look in a school to have a teacher that's trans, because kids pick on anything, like with
Yes,
me,
they do. I've really noticed,
yeah,
Uh,
they'll do, and they'll say anything, like if I'm having a bit of confrontation with a kid, it's, they'll say, "Oh, you're bald, you got a big nose, you're this, that, and the other." With staff who are openly gay, they'll say, "Oh, you're just a lesbo, or you're just this," and it just comes out. They just pick on anything they can
yeah,
find
yeah.
to say, and I think, I don't think trans would be any different. I think that for that reason, it might be an extra challenge, for someone like that to break into teaching. Do you know any trans teachers yourself?
I don't. Uh, uh, as far as I'm aware of, the only openly gay um teacher was a sports teacher I had in, I think it was grade 5 or something, and this would have been in 1998, 99 or so.
Hmm.
But it was a small industrial town, where the general environment for being LGBT plus wasn't exceptionally pleasant, shall we say.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. After that, when I went, well, now that I think of it, in secondary school, from when I was in school in Brussels, there were two French gay men as teaching staff, and they actually ended up in a relationship uh, somewhere around that time. Uh, we have. I'll take a comment now from Hoofwankel. I used to work in a college and I was open. This doesn't, well, LGBT plus, I would assume, but wouldn't specify. Uh,
I
then
wonder how
it's,
long ago that was, like for Hoofwankel. I wonder what is that
yeah,
in
let us
sort of
know.
recent times, or not asking them to tell us how old they are, but I wonder how long ago that was.
Yeah, yeah, please tell us. Let us know in the chat. And then we have Nikki Daily Triglavian Princess saying cats, cats, conspiracy cats. Just had to take that one up. Thanks, Nikki. Then Microraptor is asking, are Hades Corner and or cats LGBTQ? I'm new to Haiti and I've never heard cats talk about it. I'll start with myself. I'm transgender, male to female, and lesbian, but I can't really say anything for cats.
No, I'm heterosexual. I'm married. I've got kids. No, no history of anything like that with
Yeah,
me. I say I'm here as a teacher to talk about how it manifests in schools, but no, I'm
the, but but
not gay.
there are certain people on YouTube who call you a wanker.
Yeah. There's lots of people who call me all sorts of things. Yeah. So
Yeah, we have
that's
an
part of
answer
it.
from Hoofwankel. Openly trans was just a few years ago. I worked in the library and did some teaching sessions too.
See, that's very interesting. I would love to know what the initial response from the kids were when you started working there, because I'm sure after
It
time,
was a
you're
college.
just
It was a
college,
college, so
right? So what
not
would that be
kids
like,
really,
16 to
but
18 year olds?
students and stuff.
Hmm. Just going back to what you said before, though, like has things changed? Um,
Yeah,
I mean, like I said, when I first started teaching, it was normal, just to have openly gay staff and the kids knew about it, etc. But when I think back to when I was at school, which would be, just 6 or 7 years before I started teaching, um, I don't ever recall at school ever knowing about anything to do with any of the members of staff. And there'd be rumors, kids would have rumors about, oh, is this staff, gay? Is this staff lesbian or whatever? But if you ever heard talking about it, you get a right bollocking off the teacher of the school. And it was shut down, was now, if a member of our staff is asked, oh, so you gay? Quite often they just say, well, yes, I am. So
yeah.
maybe there has been a shift really, or
Now that we were on the topic of trans people, there's Microraptor responding to Hoofwankel. I imagine kids today are more open to trans people than kids were, say, 20 years ago. What do you what do you think of this one, Cass?
I'd agree. I think that the way things are moving in terms of, and we talked last time about the power of social media and
Yeah,
and that exposing people to, on smartphones and the internet, etc. That exposes people to ideas and cultures that they're not used to. I remember back to being a child. I don't ever remember seeing a trans person ever. I don't ever remember seeing one. But now, when I'm out and about, that I will see people, and I think what's happened is social media has kind of made people more aware of it, made people more confident of it. So I'm just wondering how many people that long ago were hiding that side of themselves because I don't know, maybe you'll know better, but were they thinking I'm the only one? You know what I mean?
yeah. It really. For, uh, First, I'd like to get Nikki's comments. Depend on where you live, though, which is true.
Hmm.
If you live in the Aussie outback versus Manhattan, New York, or downtown London, or then in some rural Arkansas, it there's a huge difference on where you live. Um, yeah, back to your question, really. Uh, yeah, Bible Belt America, says Nikki, but it's really the feeling of being the only one odd, and that is what causes, in a lot of cases, what these this depression of LGBT plus youth, not just trans. Uh, when you start getting the realization that, okay, I'm not cis and straight, but of course you don't have the words at that time for those.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but I'm certain that there are people you encountered that are now teachers or teaching staff that were trans or are still trans, and then but they just decided to uh, to hide it really for a reason or another.
Well, like Microraptor said in the chat, you know, I probably have seen them without knowing it, you know, and it probably has been. And I can imagine that if you were trans and you were applying for a job at a school, etc., I can imagine that would go against you in an interview. I can imagine. I don't think it would be deliberate. I don't think anybody will be sat there and deliberately thinking, I am not going to employ this person because of trans. But I think that in a school environment, you wonder, how is this person going to be in front of a group of 30 kids who don't want to be there, disaffected kids? How are they going to be? And I think subconsciously you'd be thinking, you know, is this person going to be strong enough, strong-willed enough, if you like, and strong enough personality to handle it? And I'm sure they are, and I'm absolutely sure that they will be. And it is a prejudice, I suppose. But I would imagine it would be. So that's why I'm interested to. Who was it that said? Was it Hu Frankel that said they were working? How the kids were. You know, whether it was a novelty at first for the kids and it died down. Like, you know, it'd be really interesting to hear that.
Yeah, it was. Hu Frankel worked in a college, so that they would be adults, presumably, in college, so it wouldn't really be kids, like minors. But
yeah, be more sort of like 16-year-olds, were it 16 to 18?
Susan, Susan, my wonderful guest from last week. Please go check out last week's video. Susan says, here in the States, my grandchildren seem much more open-minded and accepting of others. This is probably in reference to the change over the past 20 years we just discussed.
I think what you notice in life is you notice change, and when something new comes along, you know, there's a part of you. I'm sure there's a part of your subconscious somewhere that doesn't like it, that thinks that doesn't fit with what's normal to me, and you have that sort of prejudice, and maybe like people who are our generation. Well, say I'm old. I'm old, but people who are old, man, seeing sort of like trans people, etc., is. And seeing it become more common, that is a change to them. That is something that's not normal to them in their experiences. But the kids of today, who've been, like I said, exposed to it with social media, etc., it's not. They're not going to have that. They're not going to have a life where they're not really aware of it, and then suddenly, bang, here it is.
Yeah,
they're going to grow up in a different environment. You know, which I hope that makes sense. What I'm trying to say there, that you know, they won't have.
I get what you mean, and hope the viewers will too. Regarding the question about what age the students were, Hu Frankel is saying 16 and over. And I'll pick up a few comments now. I can't. Yeah, this is regarding the question whether or not both of us are LGBTQ. There's Microraptor saying, as he talks, referring to you, as he talks about flat Earth, one thing we can say about Cat's preferences is that he likes curves.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, that's quite obvious from his videos. And then back to schools, there's trans atheist. I would like to know what the correlation between acceptance of LGBT in schools and the fading out of religion in school.
Fading out of religion. Now that's interesting because I have
I
worked at
mean, reducing the religion lessons, and
ah
here in Finland, and as far as I'm aware of, in Sweden, we have mandatory religion lessons. It depends on whether you're Lutheran, which is the main church. 70% or so of Finns are members, and then the Eastern Orthodox and so on. It's mandatory for members of those churches.
we have so like two sides of religion in school. We have like the religious education which every school's got to provide, but that's nothing to do with worship, and essentially you learn more about other religions than you do, or as much about other religions as you do your own as you're going through school. And it's very
Yeah,
factual. There's an exam at the end of it. You get a qualification for religious education, but then there are schools that are religious schools and have they even have their own like version of Ofsted, if you like, where they'll
yeah,
like the religious version where they'll come in and judge a school on it.
yeah,
But
of course.
if there's I'm not really sure if there is a correlation or a link between the two at all. Schools can independently opt to be religious schools or not religious schools, and but I'm not sure there is a correlation between the two.
Yeah, Microraptor corrected on me on that, saying Swedish education has a generalized religion class, though. So you're supposed to learn about it in a way that doesn't favor one more than others.
Yeah, and that would be the
Yeah,
same.
I'm not sure what the situation is currently, but I know from past experience with my ex-partner having kids to in primary and secondary school, they did have these sort of in their schools at that time. They had these Lutheran religion lessons, telling but it was more general about the doctrine and teachings, but they weren't aren't really the practices as such were pushed down their throats,
Hmm.
which is a somewhat light version of what I had in the 90s. It, we had we had to go, if you were a member of the church, you were obligated to go to Christmas and Easter church, the church service in the in the local church. But that's that's what it was here in the 90s, and as well as high school. When I went to finish high school, I was still a member of the church back then, not anymore, and we had to attend the Christmas and Easter mass, but I pretty much talked my way out of that. I can't remember how. I just didn't.
Yeah.
I just couldn't get care less. But I think now that it's more in 2010, in 2010s and 2020s, it's a light version of what I had, and I think back in back in the late 90s in the Finnish system, uh, there's far less of that shoving that stuff down your throat, and more ethical issues when it comes to religion and such.
Mm.
And I think it has come, this change has come hand in hand with how more accepting kids are these days. Um, with when it comes to my ex's kids, they were far more open and accepting towards L- LGBT plus people than my schoolmates were back in the 90s.
Yeah.
So there's, at least in Finland, there's been a change, a big one.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's I don't think it's been a sudden thing, is it? I
Yeah.
just think people, as they become more aware, the more exposed you are to something, the more used to it you become, the less you fight against it,
Yeah.
or the less confusing it is to you. And I get that. Like I say, the fact that everybody's got in the palm of the hand something that's constantly
Yeah.
reminding them about, celebrities and individuals who are gay or lesbian or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it normalizes it for people.
Yeah. I'll have to take Hoofwankel's comment. Remember to like the video, guys. Yes, like the video, subscribe, and check the links down below. Previously, we had a comment from Microraptor saying ally cats, and you being on this live stream really shows that you're an ally, and I think it having teachers who are more accepting and open towards listening and comfortable talking about publicly about these things. How is there certain proportion of teachers who just absolutely refuse to talk about these, are not all that open and being possibly hostile towards LGBT plus?
Well, like I say, in terms of, I've never encountered it trans in a school, but in terms of
you mentioned that, yeah,
homosexual, I've never. I mean, everybody's an individual, so I'm sure there are individuals out there who for whatever reason, it still doesn't appreciate that you can be human and be gay, or human and be lesbian, or whatever. I'm sure there are individuals like that, but I've never encountered it on a school level. And the main, I think, like I said last time, the main thing that teachers try and do is just create a nice, calm learning environment for the people who are in that room. And, you've got to show a lot of tolerance to do that. Everybody's life becomes so much more difficult if the environment inside that room is not calm and and quiet and safe for everybody. The teacher's life becomes a lot harder. So I think a teacher will be making a rod for their own back, making their own life a lot harder if they were to how can I put it, if they were to maybe treat people differently for whatever reason, or if they were to show some kind of disdain for anything. I think they'd be making their own life a lot harder.
We hang on. Trans atheist comes to tell us, does anyone find it strange that when it comes to LGBT, it seems acceptable to query somebody's sexuality, but with heterosexuals, you would never ask what their sexual likes and dislikes are? It's a good point here. Just a side note.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. I think maybe some people are, maybe that's born out of confusion, from like people who maybe ask those questions. And I don't know, I suppose it depends how they ask them, if they're deliberately being obtuse or rude or not. But maybe, some people just naturally are curious, because they've lived knowing what straight is, but they're a little bit confused. Maybe it's just curiosity, confusion, I don't know.
It's probably, I like to think that it's because many straight cis people are unfamiliar, if you want to say that, but
I mean, if somebody
what
said to me,
what that entails.
yeah,
Because they have most adults have fairly good idea of what the sexual life of straight people typically is, but
mm,
that of the LGBT plus, not so much.
no. If somebody said to me they were bisexual, I genuinely, so if a man come to me and said, "Oh, I'm bisexual," I wouldn't be able to help but be curious about what that meant. Obviously, it means face value, they like men and women, etc.
Yeah,
Great. But I'd be thinking, oh, okay, so bisexual, but does that mean that you've got a preference for one or a preference for the other? Does it mean, there'd be so many questions going through my head because it's just so unfamiliar for me. And if I knew that person really, really well and I could have honest discussions with them, then I might ask them purely out of
yeah,
curiosity. I wouldn't be rude about it. And, if I just met somebody and they'd said it, I wouldn't then start interrogating them. But I
yeah,
genuinely would be curious because I haven't got a clue.
yeah. And I've discussed uh, the topic of people with a former teacher uh, from nurse school, and I um, went on to lecture to soon to be nurses, and they too had all kinds of interesting questions. I Although I told them to ask anything, but anyway, the key my but my point here really is that my teacher, this in particular, and as well as the others, didn't question this
Mm.
information when it my well, like, quote unquote issue of me being trans. Um, they never asked anything, and this teacher in particular I'm referring to. I hope she's watching at some point, but she was curious as to what name I want to use, and or what I which name by which name I want to be referred to, but she didn't ask the pronouns because in Finnish language we don't have male and female pronouns. We have just one gender neutral pronoun, but I think that's how it's supposed to be. If a student comes to you and says, "You know what, Katz, I'm trans," and then and I want to go by this name, and it will, and such. I think that's how it's supposed to be. Not, and it's not teacher's job to go question
Oh
uh,
no, I what
this
would happen
thing.
in that situation? That will be dealt with from the top of the school. The register will be changed. An email will go out to all staff, and it would just be a case of from now on this pupil is referred to as whatever name, and
Yeah,
that will be no interrogate, just. And I've had that before. I've had that with kids who've had changed the name for whatever reason. Maybe they've gone to live with one parent, they've left a different parent, and they want to choose the mother's maiden name, or
yeah,
they've had the mother's maiden name, they want to choose the father's last name. And there's no, if that's what they want to be called, bang, it goes on the register, that's what they're called. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to start at the beginning of every single lesson falling out with somebody, because you're using a name they don't want to be used by. That's not going to do it. That destroys that calm environment that we said that we're after.
yeah, and ex- I for actually I was looking at comments and thinking of a proper moment to get this up. Now that we talked about this, I'll take uh, this is in regards to you being an ally and such. Microraptor says maybe one of his students finds this video and can see that they have at least one teacher who supports them for who they are, and that's a good good point. You, excuse me.
Sorry.
You mentioned previously, some time ago, in another setting, that one of your own videos or another live stream, that you've had students come up telling you, "Hey, I watched your videos," and it was fun. So who knows if one of these students find this video.
Well, they might. I mean, I tweeted it out on Twitter, and I know a lot of my students create false accounts and follow me on Twitter. I have no idea who they are, and if I try and block them if I find out who they are, because we've got got to keep it appropriate. But I'm sure there's some that slip through the net, so you never know.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? I mean, kids and teenagers can be creative. But anyway, back to the actual the original topic we really had here. We mentioned last time the percentages of. I'm not gonna pull them up now. I can't. I really don't have them at hand, but. There are. I can't really remember if we touched on this before, but as to the more open environment for staff and students alike to be who they are, do you think? And we touched on students being more open, but there's quite a wide age range with regards to the generational gap in teaching stuff. I mean, my grandma graduated, retired something like 15 years ago. She was a teacher, and she was born in 1940, so there's from 1940s up until my best friend is a teacher, born in late 80s, so there's a 40-year gap. How do you think what kind of a shift or transition has there been with regards to older staff members and then the younger end, those who have just possibly graduated?
In terms of
in terms of attitude and openness, and for those older staff members, has there been sort of a shift in attitude for the better?
I think anyone who's a teacher would understand when I say you walk into a staff room, and or at least when staff rooms are a place that you go into at dinner times. It seems all a bit too busy now, but you'd walk into a staff room and you'd have like the one chair in the corner or the side of the room which belonged to the guy who'd been there for 30 years, and he was just fed up and didn't take any shit from anybody, or just was dead stuck in his ways, you know what I mean? And I'm sure that they just speak the mind.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's people in the 60s on the verge of retiring now that might be like, they might just be saying, well, it wasn't like this 20 years ago. Why do I have to refer to so and so by this name or so and so by that name, or why do I have to do X, Y, or Z? But at the end of the day, I genuinely mean it when I say that the teachers themselves were making their own lives so much harder if they let any of that confusion or irritation get through to the students. The teacher needs to have, the key to teaching is relationships with the kids, good relationships with any kid. And it doesn't matter what the interest of that kid is. You know, if it's ballet dancing or rugby or whatever, you find a way to talk to them about it. You build that relationship, because if you've got that relationship, when they come into your room, they are going to respect you more. They're going to make your life easier. So whatever, you've got to be a bit of a good liar, I suppose, or an actor if you teacher, because whatever your interests are and whatever you feel about a particular kid, you make that kid think that you're interested in them and that you have, you're really rooting for them on every level. So yeah, the old one, there might be that gap in the staff room, but I don't think the kids will feel that.
Yeah, I guess that's how it should really be, because it's not. I think it would be somewhat highly unprofessional if it were otherwise.
Hmm.
Uh, you you've been a teacher for 20 years, which means you studied in late 90s.
Yeah.
At that time in England, or wherever you studied, were there any mention of LGBT plus and what it might mean in your future job?
You know what? That's a really good question, and the answer was no. I don't know if that's different now. I don't know if it's the training is different now, but there was absolutely no mention of anything like that whatsoever. There was no mention of how kids who are sort of like developing preferences, or there was no mention of how to deal with those.
Yeah.
At all. Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. I wonder now if in the teacher training, because kids are becoming more confident in letting people know what the preferences are and who they are, I wonder if there is some way of how you would deal with that in teacher training. But yeah, good question, because I don't remember any of that whatsoever. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of have so you graduated sometime around the millennia, but has there been training? I would assume that teachers get supplementary courses every now and then throughout the years. Uh, has there been any, sort of quote unquote sensitivity courses or training on how to sort of maybe face these issues is probably a bad expression, but do you get what I can I get a touch on that?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and there is a lot of sort of like in-house, in-school training that goes on, and but a lot of it kind of is under the one net catch-all guise of safeguarding. So essentially, you get your safeguarding training, and that is going to tell you how you deal with kids who have sensitive issues, but
Yeah.
never specifics. Those sensitive issues could be anything. And the safeguarding training, I think we mentioned last time, is very standoffish. You can ask a child, if you think someone's upset, worried, you can ask them, hey, how are you doing today? You all right? Anything you want to tell me? And then after that, you can't ask any more questions. You can't.
Yeah.
You listen to what they've got to say, and whatever the concern is, then sort of gets passed on. So that's as far as the train has gone. But it's never been specifically, what about kids who are from ethnic minorities? What about kids who are perhaps in danger of FGM, or kids who are in danger of whatever, or kids who are gay or lesbian? Never been nailed down into those specifics.
Right. In my opinion, there I have no idea what the contemporary teacher training and yeah micro yeah what it and what they teach to teachers nowadays in the base training in the university, or nor do I know what the supplementary. Oh yeah, I was about to take that on the screen. Thanks for
Oh,
asking.
sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, I, but my understanding is there is some sensitivity training, and for teachers specifically,
Mhm.
and as well as the school nurses and other staff who are in contact with in direct contact with students. But actually, I should probably consult my friend because he's a teacher, and he's the last time I checked, he's the vice headmaster of a secondary school.
Right. Okay.
But maybe I'll make another video or a stream with someone else on that, specifically the situation in Finland. Now, have there been any sort of cases of clear, or at least high profile, in the UK, high profile clear discrimination when it comes to teaching staff being sacked or refused employment directly due to being LGBT plus?
Nothing high profile, so there's no sort of national case that I'm aware of whatsoever. I mean, like I say,
How about
in my
locally?
teaching, yeah, in my teaching career, working with gay or lesbian is fairly normal. You know, in a staff room, it's quite you'd expect to see gay or lesbian teachers. But like I said, I've never ever encountered a transgender teacher. So I just wonder whether consciously that there are, or whether they're applying for teaching. You know, I've no idea with that what's going on. But I've never ever seen one.
Yeah. Anyway, because in other professions that there are always, in every civilized country, some cases are publicized, or high profile cases of LGBT plus student teachers and other staff being fired or refusing employment, just based on the basis that they are LGBT plus. Back in the 90s, I mentioned the sports teacher, the openly gay guy.
Mm-hmm.
There were, I heard, in later years, I heard claims that he got sacked for being gay, which, as far as I'm aware of, wasn't necessarily illegal back then. But he was there for a very short while, maybe half a school year.
You can, if you want to teach, and I've seen this a lot when I've been to schools that have had new management take over, and they come in and they decide, right, I'm going to empty the staff out of this department and bring my own staff in. And you if you decide you want rid of somebody, you can get rid of somebody. The final reason, that you shove them out the door with, isn't necessarily the reason that up here you've decided to get rid of them for. So, if a teacher decides that they don't like the personality or the sexuality or whatever of a member of staff, then they can be sacked. But it's never going to say on the letter of termination, you were sacked for being gay. But if that's their mindset of the headmaster, that they're worried about what parents are going to think, or if that happens to be their mindset, they can find a way for sure to get rid of somebody.
That particular course of action was made illegal some years back, but it was sort of a gray area. when it came to, at least here, whether or not it well, it's been 10 to 15 years at least, but before that it was a grey area. Hoofwankel says Lucy Meadows was a trans teacher who was hounded by the press.
That
I
name
might-
rings a bell.
Yeah, that rings a bell. I
Let me
think
Google
I've heard this person's name somewhere before, but
Oh yeah.
who is
Yeah, I
it?
remember now. I do remember now. Now I've looked at the story. It was about 7 or 8 years ago, wasn't it?
Oh, where?
Did she commit suicide?
Oh, was it? Where was it? UK, US,
Yeah.
down under.
What was it? Let's have a. I remember the story. I don't remember much of the details, but I do remember the story.
Okay. Well, this is lovely viewers. This is fact checking on the fly.
Yeah, from Accrington.
Yeah, exactly. So, because there's certain person I won't mention here who couldn't fact check a simple thing in 10 seconds.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. No, that rings a bell now.
Wanko says posted a link but wouldn't post. Yeah, posting links is for admins or / moderators. But anyway, I can go. Yeah, I'll Google it up, and after the stream, I'll put some links down below. Trans atheist says, I think for us trans people, we have to assess carefully what professions are going to cause too much trouble for us and others. So I think most trans teachers would choose college or uni over schools. What are your thoughts on this one, Katz?
You know, I think that's unfortunately probably correct. You know, I mean, we don't live in an ideal world. We all
Of
lock
course
our
not.
doors for one reason, you know, and if we didn't lock our doors and somebody burgled our house, is that the burglar's fault? Of course it's the burglar's fault, you know, but we
Yeah.
could have prevented it by locking the door. And you know, if you're a trans person and you go into a school and you experience abuse from the kids, the young, you know, it's the kids who are kind of like below 16 that
Exactly.
will be most harsh with it. You know, is that your fault? Of course it's not your fault. Of course other people should be, you know, thinking about the way they conduct themselves. But you can avoid that situation. You know, I don't think we're in a situation where you would expect to go into a school and not have backlash from parents and not have backlash from
Of
some
course,
kids.
yeah.
And like saying, you know, that's not an ideal situation, but it is the reality of it, you know. So I can understand.
Unfortunately, I mean, yeah. I totally agree with you that I wish this wasn't the case, but it is.
Yeah, well, that's it. It is the situation that we're in, isn't it? And you've got to handle that because, you know, you're not, by putting yourself in one of those positions, you're not going to change the bigger picture. You're gonna have to sink or swim in the situation you put yourself in. And like I say, it's not ideal, is it? It's not. It's
No,
not nice.
never.
I can see why you'd have to, you'd have to think very, very carefully about what profession, because you only get one life, and it's a short one.
Indeed. I mean, yeah, I got the link for the story.
It's the Lucy
Sorry,
Meadows story.
Yeah, that one. I'll try to get it on the screen if I just if I just know how to do it, because me a dumb. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. So she she will. It's suicide. It's tragic, transphobic. Due to transphobia, a teacher, but unfortunately these things happen.
It's I think from what I've read on the little link I've googled here as well, it seems that the press were to blame for it.
Yeah, really a high profile, it seems.
Which is a shame, but I think, God, I mean, these days, if somebody, if a celebrity or a public figure came out and underwent gender reassignment or whatever, I don't know the technical terminology, had a sex change.
Gender reassignment, yeah.
I think now, even sort of like 10 years on from that, the media would treat that differently, but I do wonder.
I guess so.
We wonder how it would be still in education, because parents will they still be saying, "Is this confusing for my child? Is it not? Is it?" I don't know. I don't know what those attitudes would be.
I've heard the argument it's confusing to the child, but I think the truth of the matter is that if you lie to the kid about stuff like this, don't tell them, and they get mixed information, that's even more confusing.
Yeah, I think we're at a point now.
Yeah.
No, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, if you get confusing, like contradicting information from your parents denying that these things don't exist or some sick in some way, and then you get the appropriate information from your school, from your science teacher or whoever teaches these things in that particular school. So that kind of setting, in my opinion, can cause issues, especially if someone's of certain age, say 11, 12, 13, and that's why I think it would be crucially important that schools in every country, whether it be whatever the subject is with regards to LGBT plus, they should, in every country, they should push certain extra courses, maybe, if you can use that word, for teaching stuff, in order to to get the correction information out regarding these issues. What do you think of this sort of training, and or at least the possibility of getting such training for teachers in general?
Yeah, I think on such a specific issue, I think that would work very well on a school-to-school sort of basis. So if a school did have a transgender member of staff or whatever, and they did find that there was a lack of tolerance from parents, then applying it to that setting, I think would be just what's needed. And I've seen things like that in the past, where I've worked at schools where there's been a lot of racial tension between children, and the school has done outreach programs to parents and provided training, etc., within the school, about education, about learn about different cultures, etc., and trying to tackle it from that direction. So I think it's an excellent suggestion, but I don't think that would ever happen nationwide until there was a real common influx of transgender teachers into schools. But on a school-by-school basis, I think will be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, what I really think last time in part one we touched on the concept of this. Like I said, this doesn't translate well, but if I translate it literally, it's something like experienced expert. But I don't think it should. Do you think it should? Schools should rely on these kind of people coming in without pay, just out of the goodness of their hearts, versus then teachers getting a proper extra training, maybe then to be able to, at least to somewhat adequate degree, to teach these issues to the kids. What do I reckon?
I think you've got to look at it from what will have the biggest impact on the kids. And will the biggest impact on the kids come from a teacher they see every day talking to them about a subject that they clearly have no experience about, a real life situation? Or will having somebody come in who is transgender, or having somebody come in who's at least got a lot of experience, experience in that sort of field, somebody, a fresh face that the kids can look at, and they're not listening to a teacher, they're listening to someone who's got genuine life experience. And when that person is telling them how these issues have affected them personally, the kids can believe that, they can. I think that's far more effective than just having a teacher like me who knows nothing about the issue really, kind of cobbling together some lines and a presentation to give a class, So I think, it's not necessarily relying on outside people coming in and doing it but I think it's understanding the value of people who've got real world experience and allowing the kids to see that. So I think that's the best way.
Yeah, that reminds me of I've done that stuff, going to talk about trans stuff in this setting. And that kind of sort of nullifies my previous question, because in some ways, but I've always told the kids, the teenagers, as well as the adults I've talked to a number of times, that I want to show that that trans people aren't some random weirdos out there. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I look very conventional myself in any way, having this beanie and stuff here, and but anyway, what you said that kids might look at the teachers talking about this and say, what the hell do you know about this personally? In that way, do you think it would be a good idea to implement this kind of concept in whether it be individual schools or schools in a wider sense, maybe England and Wales or something?
I would love to see schools on a regular basis have people come in with experience of all sorts of different fields and present to the kids. I've only seen it once and it worked beautifully. We obviously, I told you about racism, didn't I? We had a school, there was like an outreach program because of the little problem with tension between people of different races. And the school brought a Jewish person in who was a teacher himself, actually, from another school. But he didn't come in and tell anyone he was a teacher. He just came in as a Jewish person and gave the stories in his life of all the positive things he'd done, all the good things he'd done, and then all the abuse and the anti-Semitism that he'd experienced. And it was quite heartbreaking to the stories. And when it was over, the kids applauded him and they all wanted to speak to him and shook his hands. And they were talking about what he'd said for days and days and days. Whereas if I'd have stood up in front of some kids and said, by the way, as a totally non-Jewish person that's never experienced any anti-Semitism, it's bad to be anti-Semitic, the kids wouldn't have agreed. They'd have gone, well, yeah, of course it is. But that was it. But that guy coming in left an imprint on them. And I think I think that's a cracking idea. So not just LGBTQ, but all, draw on the experience of your community, bring people in that can help kids really get a taste of
the real deal.
Affect people. Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Anyway, would it be, now that we're talking about this specifically, would it be in your power perhaps to start this kind of process of getting these people in schools, or a school, or a number of schools in the area where I live?
Yeah, I certainly think within a single school setting, I mean, teachers, part of their pay progression now is what they're doing extracurricular to support the school as a whole. And like I said last time, that the school that I've just left does have its own LGBTQ association, which is, I think, probably the only school I know that's got one, and that was started by a teacher who I'm sure brings people in to talk to. I think he handles that. I think he does that himself. So it's certainly within the power of a normal teacher, as long as you get the blessing from the senior management. Sure,
of course, you'll have to get that one.
Yeah, I think in this particular issue, though, you've obviously got to have a specific interest in that niche, in that very specific area.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And or have a member of staff that does. I don't think a school would ever say, right, we need to bring in specifically LGBT.
I highly doubt it.
But I do think that they might say we do need to bring in people of lots of different experiences, of which one of them will be LGBTQ, and present those to the kids. I think that would be so valuable.
Yeah, because there's always what new can be brought into this picture. And I think I like the quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. I mean, go and get it out there, and at least try to make a difference. Who knows what happens?
Yeah, well, you're right. So it's nice quote. And people like yourselves are doing that, aren't you? You are being that. You are publicly putting stuff out there for people to see, and you're part of that, which is great.
You cut out a bit.
All right, sorry. No, just saying, people like yourself who are becoming prominent on social media, etc., and are putting those stories and experiences out there. You are doing exactly what you said there. You are being that change, aren't you? You're not just living your own life. You're going out there and doing something to help others, which I think's great.
Yeah, because I think that teachers, in most cases, are in the position of at least trying to make a difference to their students, whether it be a 7-year-old or a 16-year-old. They can whether it be these LGBT plus things or something else. Trying to get some values out there. Some uh, kind of not values as in bigotry and hatred and spewing shit out to students, but rather the shape teachers, in my opinion, are shaping the society of tomorrow in many ways.
I think they certainly have a big role to play. Obviously, because 6 hours a day of the waking day, or if not more, those kids are at school with those teachers. A lot of the teachers will become role models to the kids. A lot of the teachers will become the opposite of that. They'll be a source of, if they don't build good relationships, they'll become a source of anxiety for those kids who don't want to go to certain
Of course, yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's easy to forget that when you're planning your lessons and you're doing all your other stuff on the outside, and you just had a class where you've had a bad class because you've fallen out with somebody, and another class set of kids are walking in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy to forget that you need to be positive.
What you just said might have what you just said not well, okay, the kid you had a falling out with, but the whatever that may be, but the other kids in the class, whether it be a lesson about blue and red shift, and then a kid says E equals MC squared is factually incorrect, and you say, yeah, and you get pissed. Or whatever that may be,
Teaching Sleeping Warrior, I think he'd say that.
Yeah. Wonderful guy. Lovely chap. Anyway, we've been babbling on for an hour and 20 seconds or so. I think we could be wrapping up in 15 to 20 minutes. What do you reckon?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. I'm good for another 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'll take a comment on the screen from Trans Atheist. I suppose for teachers it's very difficult to affect change on this level, as they have to juggle a wide array of age ranges and also what different kids can handle. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think all you can do as a teacher is to be the best role model to the kids that you can, and I think that's it. And I think kids will pick up on that. Like I said, we've all had teachers in our past that we like. We've all had teachers we didn't because of that. And if you can just be the very best role model, and if that involves being tolerant or taking an interest in somebody who's got interest in LBG. I got my letters wrong, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Then that's going to leave an imprint on that child. But similarly, if you've got a child who's a rugby player, you take interest and have a chat with him about that, because you show it, whoever the child is, you just show interest in what they're doing. You be that role model, and hopefully you give the child a positive experience, and they come home from school thinking that they've been valued.
Yeah. Of course, I think it's really important to get the kids the feeling that they are respected as they come. That's why I think it's hugely important that the attitudes regarding all kinds of stuff, whether it be LGBT plus or something else, that have the attitudes of the teachers right, that they don't spew out all kinds of BS, and then have the kid think get at least one or two kids in the class thinking, could this be true? Would there be something to this? When in fact there is nothing to that. There's nothing but BS. Like all kinds of Mr. Sleeping Warrior stuff.
Well, that's it. And especially when you're young, you can't see what's you. It's not as easy for you to predict. You when you're young, your bullshit detector doesn't work as well. Is what I'm trying to say. Excuse my language, but like when somebody's young, somebody can say something and a kid can just buy into it and just accept it. So yeah, you've got to be careful. And I'm always aware that if I'm stood in front of a class of kids or whatever. I haven't got all the answers when it comes to politics and religion or moral or ethic. So I won't make bold statements. I won't tell people what I believe in terms of politics. I won't tell people what I believe in terms of religion or anything like that, because a kid could influence. They could go home and say to the mum, "Oh, Mr. So and So today he said this," and that could be completely in odds to the parents' beliefs, and then you're opening a can of worms. So.
And right, it could be stuff like that. If a teacher goes on a rant about whatever the topic may be, but what the teacher in fact spews out is just plain horse manure. There's no truth to it, and then the kid goes to their parents and Mom, Dad, what's this? And that will cause all kinds of interesting after effects. What do you think?
Yeah, you like I say, you've got to be careful what you're saying. I don't think. I mean, I'm just wondering when it comes to LGBTQ stuff. I'm unsure how a teacher would end up speaking about that with a class and giving their own opinion on it. A teacher shouldn't be prompting conversations on that without good cause, for the reason that we've just said, or that I've said before. Kids should be hearing stuff like that from people who've got the real life experience. Schools should be going out there, bringing people in, letting kids listen to them about what their experiences are. If somebody like me decided to share my experiences of it, which are zero, I'm not going to give the kids anything of any value. I think that all I can do is to stress tolerance, and you do that by being a role model and showing tolerance yourself, just stressing to the kids how important it is to be tolerant of other people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because unless said teacher happens to be LGBT plus or some other minority, it's kind of I kind of take that as there could be the hazard of or the danger of misunderstanding or misconceptions that this non-LGBT plus teacher might have, regardless of stuff they've learned from books that have stuff factually correct and very matter in fact, and perhaps the extra training they've received as a part of their job, or perhaps read up on it online, appropriate sources in this case.
Yeah, I think
you're right on that.
I think within a school setting, you've got lots of people, and everybody brings their own different life experience and stuff. And schools will be fortunate enough to have gay or lesbian teachers within the school, or teachers like, the last school I worked at, who were willing to set up something for LGBT issues. And I think
Yeah.
it's more valuable if it's going to be, if any message or training or anything, any message to the kids is going to come from inside the school and not someone from outside, then I don't think it should be all the members of staff delivering that. I think that the staff who have that experience should be the ones delivering it. The staff that understand, that is my opinion. Not that I'm against delivering stuff, but I just know that if I say anything, it'll be in one ear and out the other, because I'm not gay and I'm not trans and I never have been, and I've got no experience of it. So why should the kids listen to me? Why should the kids listen to my opinion on it?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine a situation, you going on start talking about it, and then your student saying, "What the fuck? What the fuck do you know about this, Catz?" And then
well, if I was just talking about tolerance, and just and being the role model that teachers really should be, that's fine. And then that can encompass everything. If the topic of LGBTQ comes up, whatever, then just approach it from that view. We're all human beings, and why do you have these negative views? What? And I think when you start questioning why people feel a negative way about some people, you can very quickly point out that they don't have an answer. It is just a prejudice, which like I said, sorry, go on.
In that setting, I kind of see the, maybe not danger, but the falling pit, that if you, for example, you start, talking about this to your students, and they might come up with questions you can't answer, and you'd have to know, sorry, I don't have an answer for you on this one. I'll have to read up on it and then come back to you tomorrow.
Yeah, certainly don't want to be making up stuff that you're not aware of, or absolutely.
Yeah. And we have from Trans Atheist, when schools bring in secular guests from special assemblies, do any schools bring in prominent LGBT people, or do they tend to shy away from those guests? Could that be an angle to open awareness? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, every school, when it comes to things like that, bringing guests in, every school operates differently. There is no sort of policy, local educational authority policy that will make all schools behave in the same way. So schools will deal with that individually. But I don't see any reason why, if a school is the type of school that brings in people from the community to talk about their experiences, I don't see any reason why they'd shy away from bringing in someone who's LGBT. I don't, I think. Well, I think I said a while ago in this stream, I think it's a brilliant idea to get as many people from different experiences from the community in front of those kids of that community. Yeah. I think it's a great way to educate kids about where they live.
Yeah, I agree. And my wonderful guest from last week, Susan, this is in regards to teachers being openly LGBT plus. I had a lesbian gym teacher in the 70s, but the only way I knew was that they went to uni with my sister, her older sister. So it's again. Earlier tonight I talked about this gay sports teacher that we had back in the late 90s, and there's Susan's experience, and it was a really hushed up thing. It was public but not public.
Yeah.
And the only way my class got information about that was from older students from, say, years eight and nine, because they had seen this guy with his partner, and they knew. So it that that wasn't very much different from what Susan had in the 70s. So it hadn't changed in 25, 30 years, but in the but now it's half a century since, and well over 20 years since my encounter with this gay teacher. There wasn't much change in 20 25 years, but then all of a sudden in this, since the turn of millennia, it's been 20 odd years, there's been a gigantic change. It At some point in early 2000s, it was just kaboom. What have you seen? What have this sort of change in attitudes in schools been in the, if we take the past 20 years you've been a teacher, and then say 30, 25, 30 years prior, like since the 70s in UK.
Just say that again, sorry.
Yeah, like in Finland, I describe the change, what has occurred in Finland in this time range. What are your thoughts on the UK situation in these sorts of changes in the 20 years you being a teacher and the, say, 20 years prior?
When I was, yeah, I just think it's no longer taboo. You know, when I was at school, if somebody was gay in the class, or if you suspected a teacher was, it was, you know, you talk about it in whispers with your friends. You know, it will be a gossip.
Yeah.
It will be, you know, but and I'm sure to an extent that still exists today. But what also exists today is an openness from some, you know, pupils and staff, and it's just, it doesn't become an object of, how can I put it, like novelty or ridicule or anything. You know, it just is what it is. You know, and when I was a kid, we didn't have that. Everything was always under the covers, under the table. You know, it was all whispers. But there is an openness now, and I'm sure there are people out there not comfortable about being open. And I'm sure the whispering still takes place, but at least there are role models for people like that in schools who are just happily open, and that's definitely been a change that I've noticed.
Yeah, and as we discussed earlier, that the change can be made. It does if the willingness for the change doesn't come from within the school system. I hope that there will be a change from the LGBT plus community coming from the outside, if you like.
Yeah,
like bringing out content like this, like the part one as well as this one on YouTube, and getting it out there. Not just me, but others in the community. And yeah, that's, sometimes I feel as if the system that just isn't willing to change from within, unless you know, brought in by the community. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in terms of, like, when you talk about the system, you know, the to me, I kind of think of policies. You know, when talking about the system,
Yeah.
and when I think about the policies in a school, you know, the policies are all about, you know, safeguarding the kids, safe environment, etc., and you know, nurturing kids who've got personal issues and making sure they get the support they need. And I would put LGBTQ with that.
Yeah.
I would put that as part of that. So I think the policies are there, but the awareness maybe of what the issues that they may be facing isn't there from the staff. So for example, I don't really know as a person like what stresses and strains somebody who's having those questions as they're growing up are going through. I've got absolutely no idea, so I might not recognize them as well as I should. And I know you mentioned training before, etc., and maybe that is something that could be stepped up in schools. Being able to recognize when somebody isn't happy, to be able to recognize when somebody is stressed. And again, that would also be the same if they were worrying about other problems.
Of course, yeah.
So I think that's a good to, not that you can turn all teachers into psychologists, but if there is a bigger focus on teachers being trained to see when pupils aren't really themselves, what are the telltale signs, and and then that all falls into that bigger umbrella of safeguarding we talked about.
Yeah, I really, really, really do agree with that. Now, we've been on for an hour and 31 minutes. Now, we talked about getting done in 15 to 20 minutes, and I think this is a point where it's good to end and thank my guest. And I would like to with this comment, this will be the last comment, and with this I'd like to thank my guest from Nikki. Catz has always been awesome. I agree. Now, there are links down in the description box below. There are links to Catz's both channels, Conspiracy Catz, Baltic Catz, as well as his link to his Twitter. There are also links to two Discord servers, LGBT plus safe space server, and you don't have to be LGBT plus to join. There's also a link to Hades Corner channel Discord server. Please join both. Now, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.